one, roll call. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Grant,
Here.
Mr. Carpenter,
Present.
Mr. Guido,
Here.
Mr. Leeds,
Here.
and Mrs. Stone.
Here.
Will everyone please join me for the Pledge of Allegiance? We lost the flag.
There's one out there.
Oh, it's over here? All right. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Item 1.3, any additions or deletions to the agenda?
No.
Thank you. Moving on to item 1.4, approve the agenda. May I have a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Section 2, discussion and comments from the board, starting with legislative. Mr. Leeds.
A couple things. First of all, I do know that all the senators, at least from our area, are getting bombarded with requests to get this budget taken care of and get things passed so that the cap districts get more money. And I also know that there is a push from the various newspapers, mainly the Cleveland Plain Dealer and Columbus Dispatch and Toledo Blade, I guess it is, to try to keep the monies that they have in their districts around their cities, because they don't want to lose anything, because they're getting a lot of money per student, and they claim they're losing enrollment, but they got to have the monies to get better curriculum and things like that. But there's a big fight going on. I don't know. My guess is that we will get some, but the can will be kicked on further down the road. I don't think we're going to get the whole amount by any stretch of the imagination. And so all we can do is keep after them and see what they come up with. But I'm afraid they're going to bend a little bit. That's all I have.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Butler Tech. Mr. Guido.
Graduations are both over. We had two ceremonies at the Centos Center. So it was a long day, but it was fun to be in the room together, just like we did it for us on Saturday. It was just nice to have everybody at one event. School's winding down. We did have a presentation about our diversity and inclusion committee. So Butler Tech is involved in that positive work right now as well. So they have offered to offer any assistance that we or any of our districts around may want. So just wanted to throw that out there. And then we did have the groundbreaking for the Natural Science Center last week as well. I want to apologize to the board. I had mentioned it here. I thought an email had went out to each of you, but I don't think it did. So I'll take ownership of that. But it was a good event. Nice to see the groundbreaking. And if you guys have any questions or need anything from us on that, I'd be willing to share. Cool. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Finance.
Okay, I got some good stuff tonight, and we wanted to kind of highlight some of the positives and to keep on the record our concerns. One reminder we wanted to just kind of point out is among the 20% of public districts in Ohio with we have the lowest operating expenses per pupil in that 20%. But we also are in the 20% of the districts with the highest academic performance index. So we continue to do more with less, and that's a compliment to our staff and our students and our families. But just kind of reminding, we still do a lot with a lot less money than most districts. Tonight we're going to be talking about the 5-year forecast, and Holly did a really good job in our finance subcommittee kind of explaining some of the things that made it really difficult to predict this year, although we think she did a really great job. Estimating finances proved to be a really big challenge, especially with entering, if you guys remember, we entered the forecast the beginning of the year projecting some deficit spending by spike about now, only to get worse over the future years. But a lot has happened to delay the deficit spending for a time. So that's a key word, for a time. The thought at the beginning of this year was that we would be behind in revenue because of an economic downturn, delay in tax payments, but that actually wasn't the case. We even thought that the state sales tax revenue might be down, the state might reduce our funding even more. That didn't happen. We entered the year buying hotspots to provide internet, buying disinfectant to spray everywhere, buying thermometers, purchasing Zoom and other software to help with the remote learning, paying for substitutes when staff fell sick or were quarantined. We really just didn't know how far this would all go, and as the year unfolded, many things happened to change this picture, such as we rely on local tax revenue and property values overall. They actually increased by 15%. It's been many years since the tax revenue increased and never this much, so that beat the projection. The state's revenue projections were not as dire as they predicted, so by mid-year they reinstated some of the funding they initially had cut. We didn't expect this. Some students were instructed at home and did not require some of the services, and those services are costly, so that money was not spent that we had budgeted on those students. We received federal funds and care grants that helped offset some of our expenses. We also received additional funds from the Monroe Fire Department, the City of Monroe, and our county auditor as well. And now we come to June, and the picture looks much brighter than it did back in September and October, correct? So all of this has helped a great deal, and we have a lot to be grateful for, especially particularly in our community, to thank as well, least of which are our local taxpayers. Ending on our sound the alarm, keep this on everyone's radar. We continue to be a cap district, which again will catch up to us, even though we have been blessed this year with what has occurred. This year has helped our finances in the short term. However, Ohio's school funding formula has been ruled unconstitutional by the United States. It's going to go there maybe, no. By the Ohio, Supreme Court on 3 different occasions. Ohio's system to fund schools is overly reliant on local taxes, yet for decades, the Ohio legislature has done nothing to solve it. Testimony is going on right now in Columbus, as we know, to include the Fair School Funding Plan in the state budget for fiscal year 2022. This plan would fix our capped situation over several years, and we do need our senators, Senator George Lang and Senator Steve Wilson, to support this proposal since the Senate is debating it right now. The House has passed it with flying colors. It's over 20 years since the Duroff decision was made. The Ohio Supreme Court directed that school funding was to be based on wealth and the tax capacity of the community. And this plan would bring back the word fair to Monroe and other communities in Ohio. So a lot of good things happened. We're ending on a more positive, but we still have work to do. And Holly's done a great job sounding the alarm and communicating with a lot of people. And I think anybody at the state level definitely knows who Monroe local schools are and that they're capped and that it's not fair. And there's just more and more people kind of paying attention. And fingers crossed, we just keep moving forward. So a lot of information, more than I've probably shared all year. So there you go. Exactly right. Yes.
Thank you. MEA.
I'm going to embarrass Kathy for a minute. I know that we have probably 2 more board meetings before she officially leaves, but there's a really good possibility I will not be at those. So I just wanted to thank Kathy from the MEA, how wonderful she's been to work with. By far the best superintendent I've had the pleasure of working with. She involved us. We were able to make a lot of strides. And from me personally, I want to thank you, and also from the whole association. And with that being said, I've talked to Robert a few times. He's going to be a rock star as well. If you don't know this, we've already negotiated behind the scenes, 8% raise over 3 years. And that way we don't have to worry about this in the spring. Holly, we're just giving you a heads up. But no, seriously, even though Robert's a lot bigger in stature than Kathy, I told him he has huge foots. I mean, he's got a lot to follow. It's class act, and I know he's up to it. But Kathy, again, thank you. Appreciate everything you've done, and don't be a stranger to us. Yeah. All right? Thank you. Yep.
Thank you, Mike. Section 3.
Yes, so we have a teacher retirement tonight, Sheila Holbrook. Mrs. Holbrook could not be here this evening, but we want to take the time just to give her a shout out and recognize her, and certainly congratulate her on her standout career of 32 years in education. That's awesome, and certainly do wish her well on the next part of her journey. Mr. Catanzaro and I did go make a personal visit to her. Her team was in the kickball tournament, so we went to visit her out on the field today and presented her with the gift on behalf of the school district. So congratulations to Mrs. Holbrook, and really do appreciate the time that she has given to our school district. So
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Yep, 32 years. Congratulations. Section 4, communications, comments from the public. Seeing none, we will move on to item 5, presentations. Mr. Catanzaro.
So we have Mr. Catanzaro presenting tonight on our website. This is just a draft preview of the work that he has been doing with Craig, our webmaster, and then Meg, and who we purchased some communication services from, as well as Tony. So they have been working on this, and this feedback, I don't want to steal Mr. Catanzaro's thunder, but came
As long as it didn't take from my time, if I just still have my 5 minutes.
Yeah. Back about a year and a half ago, I think it was pre-COVID, Meg did focus groups, and we received feedback from our staff and our parents about our website and some improvements that they thought would enhance and make it easier to navigate. So they took that information and they have been working on it. And at this time, I'm going to turn it over to you, Catanzaro.
All right. So as Kathy described, we over the years, our website's been through a few iterations in my 7 years here. I think this is our third kind of iteration. We are going through a 2-phase process. What Kathy described in responding to parent feedback, stakeholder feedback, is the facade of the website, how it looks, how it's laid out. That's phase 1. And really, we started in full force February, March-ish, have been working, shared with the cabinet and leadership teams. Your chance to take a look at it tonight, and I'll walk you through just 2 pages on this. The link in the agenda works, but we're looking primarily at the main page and the primary school page. Rather than us scale something through the whole website and then change it in 80 places, we're using just these 2 as our primary. Our second phase will be to work on the back end, so essentially what our users use. Some you probably will never even see, but that's coming as soon as we get this portion launched. Our initial timeline is to launch this over the summer, based on feedback, and depending on how much more design work we have to do, it'll be scaled out over the rest of the site and then launched. So essentially, we've streamlined a little bit on the, and I'm not sure if this, without the trackpad. There we go. There we go. So you'll see we've taken from the parent feedback, these are things that people have typically been looking for. Rather than have to go into menus and try to find them, these are based on our surveys and a review of our web analytics. These are the frequent flyers and the quick hitters. So we've essentially, it used to be on our current site, you would see the buildings and athletics. You'd see all 4 buildings and athletics. Now we've gone this route. Similar fashion of news and a Google Calendar feed, and then social media modules and our footers, similar but slightly reworked based on Meg's work with parents. And then under the primary school, we have taken and elevated to the top these quick links. They used to be kind of buried down on one side. These are things the principals will be able to control and can control that are building specific and unique, and then a common appearance and find it fast through all, and then similar news and information there. So basically, we wanted to show it to you. You don't need to give a ton of feedback. If you have feedback now, that's great. If you have anything, if you want to email back to Kathy this week, we would love any feedback. It will ideally early June. We'll be having our kind of final design plans to get a timeline and launch this summer, so we have it up and running before August and the craziness of back to school. I would say in the mobile version, I think if I shrink this, it will scale. So the mobile version also is essentially blocks or tiles that scale. So although our current website is mobile friendly, we have done more play testing with this to try and make sure it does what we want and includes some discussion about things we could take out, still trying to, if people want the mobile version, to get only what's needed. The advantage of our current website, we have analytics for all of the sites or all of the news things. And our current plan is to set up the launch of this and then a look at it sometime second semester next year to say, hey, based on our traffic and our experience, so that's kind of hopefully an iterative process that we build into going forward. Chance for questions or thoughts?
Can I have that picture right there? Is it possible that we can get that picture with Brett in it?
With a
getting
safety patrol.
Photoshop can do a lot of things.
Never gonna happen?
But we could all be in it because we were safety patrol, just not him. Right?
No, I think it's great.
Are you-
I love having the quick links down below because obviously if that's what everyone's searching for, you don't have to go up to the top toolbars to find it.
Yeah.
And I know for me at least, when I went to go look at the schedules for athletics, sometimes on a mobile, they're a little cumbersome because you can't enlarge it or can't decrease the size of it. So it looks good so far.
The only other thing I would say, I didn't mention it, Kathy, when we were going through this, we actually have connected with Quality Publishing, is the group that does the Buzz and the our typical print publishing. Their designer has looked at this to try and mirror so that our public-facing stuff looks similar. So they're part of their graphics and the Hornet overlay and some of the other stuff comes from them. Does not come from Tony I and our webmaster. It is a collaboration trying to make our public-facing. Okay.
Looks good.
Okay. And before I relinquish the microphone, I will echo Mike's statements. I don't know if the leadership team will have another representative presenting between now and Kathy's final day, but we appreciate her service to the district and has been a pleasure to work with you and for you. We're excited for Robert as well. So, since she didn't want to put her name on the recognition with Sheila Holbrook, that's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Jesse.
Jesse.
Thanks, Jesse.
Appreciate it.
A lot of hard work.
All right, moving on to section 6, treasurer's business. Mrs. Cahall.
I'd like to recommend approval of the minutes from the special meetings on April 8th, April 13th, April 15th, April 20th, and the regular meeting on April 26th.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.2.
And next, I'm asking you to approve the financial report for April 30th, 2021.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Well, I'd like to report that our cash balance in the general fund on April 30th was $29.6 million, and we have $37.1 million in all funds together. And in projecting for the end of the year, I noticed that purchase services was quite a bit budgeted more than we spent, which, I mean, is a good thing, but it's something you want to look at because why did that happen? But we did get health and wellness funds, which offset psychologists, and those are contracted service. We saw a decrease in copier costs. We did switch from Xerox to Woodhull in the middle of the year. That went down. We had much less expenses in travel, meeting expense. We didn't pay for contracted transportation for a number of students. Our facility repairs, purchase services for those went down because we did have another maintenance person through Sodexo. And I think that's the reason that went down, but that's what I would assume. And then we also had reduction in utility expense. So there were quite a few things that happened along with what Mrs. Stone said that reduced our expenses for this year. And then we also had CARES and ESSER funds to offset. Some of those paid for offset expenses, some of those paid for instructional per digital license and cleaning, additional cleaning from Sodexo. So that's why we ended the year better. And then I did want to point out again, we're getting $1.8 million over, to spend over 3 years, which is $600,000 over each year for 3 years to support additional instruction and mental health services facilities. You can use it for a variety of student support services, so we're working on that. Okay, that's all I have for now. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cahill. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.3.
I'm asking the board to approve the bond fund for April 30th, 2021.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Okay. In April, we received $656,000 in real estate tax receipts and also $185,000 in public utility. The current balance in the bond fund is $3,577,529. Thank you.
Mr. Guido.
Everything where it's supposed to be?
Yes, it is.
Thank you.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.4.
So I'm asking the board to approve ESSER 2 grant funds in the amount of $863, and this must be used by 2023. And also Fund 510 to record those funds.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions?
We won't have any problem spending that, will we?
I don't believe, no, I
Okay.
don't.
And
Just checking.
when you say 2023, I just want for clarification, that is for fiscal year? By
Correct.
the end of fiscal year 2023?
Yes, actually, it's like September of 23.
Okay,
It goes a little beyond that.
okay. Any other questions?
So it's finished by then? It's not a renewable, it's like a...
That's correct, it's a
that's-
one-time,
That'd be awesome.
it's a one-time payment.
I'm just, so if we would hire somebody and that funding runs out, technically, I mean, that's the only,
That's correct.
I'm not to be negative, I think this is a positive thing.
Right, it is a good thing, but it is a one-time thing.
Okay,
And
thanks.
just on the side, the Inquirer published all the money from the ESSER 3 grants that all the schools would get, which is the 1.8 million. So they published that yesterday. And so I wrote another letter to the editor to say it's one-time payment and it doesn't negate needing the Fair Schools
Good for
funding
you.
plan. And so I don't know if that was political or not, but he says, see what all your public schools get. And they didn't show the 300 private and charter schools that get several hundred million, so, but I didn't say that. But anyway, it's a one-time thing, so it's going to help us. And it may not offset, it won't offset a lot of the general fund, but it will help us provide services we need to provide.
Good, thank you.
I'm waiting on Holly to get her own column in the
Yes.
Flyer. That's going to be awesome.
Treasurer's
Talk money with Holly.
Just as a side note on what she said, there is a push, guys, by the papers
Yep.
on charter schools. Big push. The charters and vouchers.
Yeah.
That's all they're talking about. And that's what they're leaning toward. They're pushing the senators, I should say, in this budget to allocate more monies to those two institutions. So no wonder that Inquirer didn't publish that.
Right. Yeah.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.5.
I'm asking the board to approve a letter of engagement with the state auditor for preparing our financial statements for 2022 and 2023.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill?
Well, I did want
go
to
ahead.
say that I did talk to them about, because the fees are going up like 12%. And I was told another bulletin would be coming out in July that would clarify their increase in their daily rate or not daily, hourly rate. And maybe they're playing catch up with salaries. I don't know, but it did bother me. And then another thing in that bulletin, they also say you can charge some of this to your bond fund. And I thought, I don't know. So
That's kind of a scary word.
though, but anyway, so
Wow. Did they really say that?
That's really there?
yeah, it did. Because because some of the reason you do this is for your bondholders, and it just said come up with a reasonable way of allocating it, but I'm just too fearful at this point. What we've been through, I
Yeah.
say.
Tread lightly.
All right. Any other questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.6.
I'm asking the board to approve the contract with Southwest Ohio Computer Consortium for services for fiscal year 2022.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Oh, the recording.
He's very excited.
I've been warned about, the mic. I gotta make sure they hear me.
Any questions? Ms. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 6.7.
Next, I'm asking the board to approve the 5-year forecast for 2022 for submission in May 31st, 2021.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Well, I would like to say a couple words here.
Yes.
Okay, well, as Leslie mentioned, many things have happened this year. There was so much influx when we were doing the budget, and we prepared the projections in September, and we were kind of planning for the worst, and it didn't happen. But one of the most significant changes happened with our increase in property taxes, our real estate taxes. And can you make that bigger, Alex? Wait. Okay, so the top line is our property taxes, and so you can see, ignore 2020 because there was an adjustment there. But anyway, it went from 9.7 million to 10.4 million. And I'm kind of projecting just a small increase from the future, but that is $900,000 additional every year. And that's hoping that, we don't have tax complaints filed or to revise people's taxes, but so far, we've had a couple, but I haven't seen a big push in that. And that's also on personal property down here too, although it didn't go up as much, but our values have gone up. But anyway, up in that area. Not knowing how the Fair School funding plan will do, I still kept state funding just flat. And that's what we want to see change over time. So if you pull, let's see. Oh, okay. Can you move it up a little bit, Alex? No, you can keep that on there and then just move it up a little bit. Okay, so this, and then can you make it bigger where there's row 6.01?
There.
Okay, so initially, we projected that we would have a deficit spending here, but because of all that's happened, we have our revenue exceeded our expenses by $2 million. And it's sort of put off the deficit spending a little more, it pushed it off. And so originally we were thinking a levy, in 23, 24, but now I have it at the very end of the the last year. So, and I say this, but I always, I say this, but there's still so much we don't know. And as I said, will there be tax appeals, and that could definitely affect our revenue. I'm not anticipating many of those. And prior to the pandemic, we did have economic stability, and but now with the pandemic, there's discussion of inflation, and where will that inflation be? We've already seen it in that state auditor's contract. But, we hear wood and building and that kind of thing, but we don't know how that's going to affect. And I didn't project anything based on what would be beyond what is normal today. So, and then we are going 1-to-1. We haven't done that yet, and we're projecting on that. And we do have digital license. Are they going to increase those because now we're using them? You just don't know these things. So I'm just cautious. We'll be watching every month again and seeing what happens with things. But this is June, May. So we're a ways away even from September. So it could even look different in September once we get things in and contracts and kind of get a better feel for what kind of changes will be made. So there's just that caveat there. I just wanted to put that in your mind. But I do feel good about. I definitely feel good about the revenue. So thank you.
Thank you, Holly.
I'd say the most profound thing you said right there was about our deficit spending and potentially the need for a levy. It's been pushed off, which is a good thing. Hopefully the community at some point in time can get really engaged with our fight around cap funding. If we were getting the revenue the state has said that we should be getting, we wouldn't even be close to talking about a levy. So I fear that if it comes time where a levy was necessary, many in the community will come back and say, well, what happened? Which is why we've been fighting so hard just to get the money that they owe us, that we as taxpayers pay, we should be getting.
And you're referring to an operating levy, not even a building levy, right?
Yeah, that's an
that's-
operating levy.
Yeah, that's, because I think sometimes when we hear levy, we're like, oh, we're talking bond,
Right.
operating.
We're talking about
Some people are like,
operating.
we don't need a levy. Well, we're not even talking about a building, a bond levy.
No.
Just
Right.
that's still something we gotta.
Well, and I heard testimony given in the Senate. I was just listening to it as I was working. And so other schools like ours were saying, we can build a building, we could pass a bond, but we don't have any taxing capacity left to operate it. And it was just nice to hear that somebody else is in our shoes.
Yep.
So that's what we got.
Thank you, Holly.
Thank you.
Any other questions? All right, Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 6.8.
Okay, last I'm just asking the board to approve transferring funds and closing accounts.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
And this is what every treasurer should do at some point, is clean up accounts, and that's what this is doing. When there's been no activity, they become dormant. And I'm suggesting these are moved into the principal's fund where the principal these were club accounts, so if they still want to have something with art, if they still want to have, or if the orchestra needs money, then the principal and the staff member could work on supporting it. So that's why I asked for y'all to transfer it. But there's no advisor managing those funds anymore, so.
Thank you. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Cahill. Section 7, Superintendent's Personnel Business.
Yes, it is recommended that the board approve resignations from the following employees.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? Mrs. Kayal, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.2.
It is recommended the board hire the following new employees for the 2021-2022 school year.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved?
Thank you, Mrs. Stone.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Yes.
I spoke up. I was very assertive. We're trying to stall this out so you have a long meeting.
Any questions? Mrs. Kayal, please call the roll. Did you have?
I just wanted to add that
Oh.
we have Jessica Miller here, one of our new
Oh,
staff.
I got a
members,
pen.
joining us.
You got a pen.
Jessica will be joining us as a second grade teacher. And so do you want to?
Well, absolutely.
We got to vote.
Oh, yeah. We do.
I mean, not that we're not happy you're here.
We have to hire
Guess we
you
should
first.
formally make it, yeah.
Yeah, we have to.
Sorry, I got a little
we gotta get rid of
excited.
this.
You're getting ahead of yourself.
I am. Hey, not very. Hey, two meetings in a row with a pen. I'm happy. Ms. Kayal, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Abstain.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried.
Okay, now welcome. Maybe grab those. I got a headache. I need my glasses.
Item 7.3.
It is recommended the board approve the following substitutes.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Mrs. Kayal, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.4.
It is recommended the board approve the following substitutes for the 2021-2022 school year.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? Mrs. Kayal, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.5.
It is recommended the board approve the following extracurricular contracts.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? This takes us all the way through winter sports, but not including spring. Is that correct?
Correct, and not all of our fall and winter. We'll have some loose ends next month as well, but
Okay.
good majority.
Okay, that's what I thought. Just was looking through here. Any other questions? Mrs. Kayal, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.6.
It is recommended the board approve renewing contracts for the following employees.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. May I have a second?
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.7.
It is recommended the board approve a new 2-year contract for the following administrators.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions?
I don't think anybody approved that. I realize that I have to say that. Oh, it's not.
You're out of order.
Remember, we talked about this.
Any other questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.8.
It is recommended the following administrators receive a 1-year extension to their contract.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 7.9.
It is recommended that the board approve additional paid summer work days completed by Beth Liebrad and Andrea Carvellano. Beth Lee will work 3 days and Andrea will work 5 days. These days will be paid according to each individual's daily rate.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Yeah, they are.
I'm like, don't call me to second it. You second it yourself. Man, it's summer almost. I'm telling you.
Any questions? Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Section 8, Superintendent's Other Business, item 8.1.
It is recommended that the board approve the following donations. Donation from Tim Kellis of JC Trophy in the amount of $125 to the softball fund, and donation from the Middletown Rotary Club for $500 to the Monroe Interact Club.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Any questions?
Thank you for the
Yep,
donation.
thank you for the donation.
Thank you much.
Mrs. Cahall, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye. Motion carried. Item 8.2.
This is the first reading of our Neola recommended policies as presented, and will take action in June of 2021.
Best part.
Get the
Tom's
reading.
already yawning down
I know,
there.
Tom's ready.
I tell you what, that's good reading, man, I tell you.
Can we go over them all?
I want a full report, Mr. Guido.
Can we go over them all right now?
Let's read them all right now. Let's make this the longest meeting ever.
May I have a motion, please? Oh, no, we don't need to. There's no action. Never mind. All
Until
right.
June.
Just a little ahead of myself.
You're
Got
just
more time
excited.
to read.
Yes. Item 8.3.
It is recommended that the board approve schools PLP online platform credit recovery classes for summer school for grades 9 through 11.
May I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Guido.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions?
I mean, has this increased over COVID at all, or?
I don't, yeah. Yeah.
what did you mean by that overall?
Like, are more students deficient, or do we expect more numbers to be using this than in the past?
Well, we just haven't had it in
We haven't had
past, that's why.
This is our first time off.
Oh. We had a credit recovery process before, though, right? Didn't we?
Use
Back
it
in the
past,
day?
Yeah, so I mean, we're
but not in
switching.
a-
Not in
But not in a summer school setting.
Got it.
Most of that is done throughout the school year. We still use Apex. We're just hoping that if we catch some kids now, that we can get them caught up so that they're not messing around with, for example, a kid trying to take geometry as a sophomore is also trying to make up algebra credit at the same time. We do have kids that are doing that where they've got two math classes, which are actually very different math. And
Right.
already failed one, now they're struggling in geometry, so hopefully we can catch some of these kids and get them caught up in the summer.
Thank you.
We'll have to play by ear to see what we have, right? Jimmy?
But
Actually do it.
I could have
But then-
used that. Should have.
I do want to point out that we had the contract for this through the summer, so there was no additional cost in regards to this program.
Oh, cool.
Oh, cool.
Any other questions? Mrs. Kale, please call the roll.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 8.4,
It is recommended that the board approve the MOU with the MEA to add the supplemental position of EL coordinator for the 2021-2022 school year.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Ms. Gale, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. And item 8.5,
I'd like to recommend that the board approve the contract with Butler County ESC for audiology services for the 2021-2022 and fee schedule.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Thank you, Mr. Carpenter. Any questions? I see that there's an increase
Yes.
of 3.8%. Was there a reasoning behind the increase, or is it just because everything else is going up and this is going up too? Okay, so it's just equipment based. Okay, gotcha. All right, thanks for clarifying. Any other questions? All right, Ms. Gale, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 8.6,
It is recommended to approve 2 change orders for construction of the new track, increasing costs by $9,770.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. I do have a question in regard, I was looking through the change order, and I noticed that we're putting in some drain tiles, I guess, underneath the turf. Was there a reason, and I don't know if maybe you or Jesse, was that a surprise?
Well, so when the original complex was built, they were never put down on that north end. And when they came out to do their survey, they realized that. And so when doing the concrete work and all of that from a drainage standpoint, so we don't have puddling.
Puddles.
Yeah, and so what they're gonna do is peel back some of the turf tie in that drainage with this and connect that. Most group who did the turf it does bless that one. So,
Okay.
yeah.
All right.
So it basically adds a drain on that north end, where if you go down on the south end, where like we have the pole vault,
Yep.
you can see the drains. We don't have that at the north.
Okay, I never realized, well,
Yeah.
I'm hardly ever up by the scoreboard, so yeah.
Right,
I never
yeah.
realized, so, all right.
Okay, the question I have is, was that supposed to be done when it was put in initially? Or was that a cost savings that somebody cut out?
That I don't know.
And my problem is this, Steve Hammond and Paul were the general contractors in all this. And if they let that go for some reason and didn't see to it that that was done, that's a strike against them, as far as I'm concerned. But if the board at that time wanted to save money and said, don't put that in, that's something different. But if that had to be put in, that should have been done.
My speculation is that in the original project, it probably should have been done. When you kind of look at the fencing, and my opinion, as now I'm not here, my perception is that they did about a quarter of the fencing that we should have done around that complex. You know, the backside, we're going to use an opening. And as an example, my guess is that's something that we, like 2004 or 5 timeframe, was taken out of scope from the original, what should have been designed into the conference layout. They also borrowed the spec of money. So my perception, but I don't have anything in documentation
Yeah.
showing me that it was proposed by finders or whoever was doing the work. My perception.
Okay.
Any other questions?
Does this add any time onto the project?
A little bit, a week or two.
That's not bad.
Not drastic compared to the whole thing. So not a month or something like that. I mean, if we have good weather, and I've asked them for an updated time scale. If we have good weather, we're still, I think in early, mid-August, I think we'll be okay. But just a few scrimmages and that, but I don't, at this point, I don't see any impact on regular season weeks.
Good, cool. Okay. Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 8.7,
Yes, it is recommended the board approve an agreement with Hamilton County Educational Service Center for services in FY 2022.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds.
Second?
Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Ms. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 8.8,
It is recommended that the board approve an agreement with Fidelity for FY 2022 for nursing services.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved.
Thanks, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Any questions? Ms.
Did we
Cahill?
have any substitute nurses last year?
I believe we did have to have substitute nurses.
We did.
Nurses, yes.
Ms. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Item 8.9,
It is recommended that the board approve a resolution authorizing the 2021-2022 membership to the Ohio High School Athletic Association.
may I have a motion, please?
So moved. Second?
Thank you, Mrs. Stone. Thank you, Mr. Guido. Any questions? Mrs. Cahill, please call the roll.
Mrs. Stone,
Aye.
Mr. Guido,
Aye.
Mr. Leeds,
Aye.
Mr. Carpenter,
Aye.
and Mr. Grant.
Aye, motion carried. Section 9, Superintendent's Update.
Quick items. First of all, I want to congratulate and thank Mr. Prohaska and the Monroe High School team for putting on another outstanding graduation for our students. It was just a wonderful day, and appreciate all the hard work that everyone put into that to make that come together for our students. I think it was a very positive day for everyone. So thank you to him, and thank you to his team. And I know we had several administrators and support staff to help make that day happen as well. So just really appreciate all the help. Secondly, I also, as we're concluding the year, just want to thank the board, our administrators, our staff, our students, and our parents. I know that it's been a very challenging year for all of us, but we did it, and we are here at the end, and I just really do appreciate the board's support and everyone working together as a team. So, because it certainly took all of us working together to get through this year, and just really appreciate everybody's support. So thank you very much. And then we're wrapping up the year, and I just want to wish everyone a wonderful, restful, and fun-filled summer. Again, so well deserved by all staff, students, and families. So everyone have a great summer.
Appreciate it. Thank you. Before we go to section 10, adjournment, we'll start with comments from the board. Mr. Lee.
Thing that impressed me was the Saturday was unbelievable. The weather, the fact that the kids were on the field, so many activities that they participated in their high school career was on that field, and they witnessed a lot of activities on the field if they didn't participate in them. And I heard a comment after graduation, and somebody said that was the most peaceful, and they meant just quiet time and beautiful setting, and for the kids to be out there. And again, I'll echo what Kathy said. Tom, you and your group did a hell of a job, and that's thank you very much. Kathy, thank you for what you've done this year in this trying times with your staff, you and your staff, and we appreciate everything you did. Everybody went out of their way, and hopefully we won't have to hear the word COVID again. So, but that's all I have.
Mr. Guido?
Yeah, I thought it was neat. My high school graduated on the field, and I think Jody did too. It was back in the dark ages, but yeah, but it was fun. It kind of took me back to that. It was especially that we did have a backup plan where we had a 1,300 seat theater. So if it rained, we could have held it in there, but so we don't have that option. So my only fear is that I'm not sure that we would always have the weather we had this Saturday, but me personally, I loved the setting. And then I did want to thank and congratulate all the teachers and the staff that we approved tonight. Well earned. Our leadership team is very solid. We talked about that in our superintendent interview. The person is really breaking into a very cohesive group, and that's one thing about Monroe is I do think we are all on the same page and all doing everything we do for the right thing, and it's for students. So, yep.
And to quote Tom Leeds, if it ain't, what is it? What was your quote?
If it's not broke, we want it better.
Yeah. Yes. It's a new theme. We always say graduation's like Super Bowl for us, so that was like super fun to be on the field. And I think a lot of us commented, it was like one of the most normal feelings in a very long time to kind of look out and it just felt so much closer to normal than not. And that gave me goosebumps. That was really cool. So what a year. Well done. And yeah, summer's here. So that's it for me. person would compliment me or something.
Well, first, just congratulations to all the teachers and everybody. I know, like, we started off, it was really a struggle. Like, nobody really knew how long the whole virtual thing was going to happen for everybody, or the hybrid learning, but, you know, just very well done by everybody. And thank you for watching after all the kids in the district. Secondly, yeah, the graduation was awesome. Like, thank you, Tom. Did a great job with that. Like, it was wonderful. And that's like always one of my favorite things. Like, I love seeing these kids who, you know, because my girls have always gone here. So I just picture, here's another like 200 kids who, you know, not all of them always went to Monroe, but, you know, just all these kids that are getting their last thing, like their last hurrah here at Monroe, and for it to be at that stadium, like it just meant so much to those families and everything. So, you know, I know everybody's poured a lot into them, so I know they're going to be very successful as they go out and take on the world now. But and the last thing is, I wanted to rub it in Brett's face that my daughter Lucy is a Hornet ambassador and on the safety patrol. So I'm sure she will be here with her little badge and everything on, and I'll just be so excited. But
Yeah, we'll be able to bring that back next year. Have them here to honor them in person.
It's gonna be
Shake their
amazing.
hands and see their badges and their, what a great time.
Did you really have to say that? I hate seeing him cry.
Your turn.
Thank you.
We just keep you humble. We keep them
Couple
humble.
things from me. First off, the graduation, Tom, you and your entire team, hands down, all the graduations I've been a part of as a board member, and going to one back in 13 when my oldest graduated, hands down the best graduation. I will say this, I got approached one before the meeting tonight and one after graduation by two parents that had seniors. They were very critical of the school on what we were going to do in regards to graduation. They felt compelled to come up. They were critical of the school, and they felt compelled to come back and say that we were wrong, and that was the best graduation. One of them had 4 kids graduate from Monroe. This is their last one, and they said that hands down the best graduation they've ever seen. So kudos to you and your team. So I loved it. Just being outside, the atmosphere, I don't know, it kind of takes you back to nostalgia days. So I love it.
The drum line was cool.
Yes.
That was
Yeah,
cool.
it was really good. Coming through the tunnel,
We didn't get to come.
coming down, that was really good. And the last thing, for everyone in this room, you guys have done a heck of a job from the beginning of school to now. And I want to personally thank you for everything that you've done, along with the teachers, the support staff, and everybody from top to bottom for everything that you've done to get us through. Kathy and Holly for leading us to this point to where we finally made it through, because no one gave us a chance. I remember at the very beginning of school year being on that Zoom meeting with you and the Butler County Board of Health saying that if we go hybrid, we are going to be shut down in 2 weeks, and that we were never going to make it through the school year. And we basically proved them wrong. So it could not have been done without any of you guys sitting in this room, the students. We do have good kids here at Monroe. We really do. They for the most part, they follow what the guidelines are and they follow the rules. So that's a good thing. So that comes from you guys. So thank you. That's it for me. Okay. So with that being said, may I have a motion? It's recommended the board adjourn the meeting at 7:34 p.m. May I have a motion?
So moved.
Thank you, Mr. Carpenter.
Second.
Thank you, Mr. Leeds. Ms. Gale, please call the roll.
Mr. Carpenter?
Aye.
Mr. Leeds?
Aye.
Mrs. Stone?
Aye.
Mr. Guido?
Aye.
And Mr. Grant?
Aye. Motion carried. Everyone have a great evening.
Thanks, everybody.
And it's still daylight.